He denied the baby for years, until a little girl walked into his boardroom. The copy machine in the teacher's lounge had been broken since October. It was February now, and nobody had fixed it. There was a sticky note on the lid that said, "Out of order, do not use in red marker," curling at one corner because the tape had given up. Marin Nash read it every morning, the same way she read the expiration date on the creamer she was going to use anyway. Some things you noticed, without expecting them to change. She stood at the counter waiting for her coffee to cool, one hand wrapped around a mug that said, "World's okayest teacher." A gift from a student 2 Christmases ago, slightly chipped at the handle. The fluorescent light above the sink had been flickering since Thursday. She'd put in a maintenance request. She wasn't holding her breath. Outside the window, the parking lot of Eastover Elementary was empty in that particular way it got on Tuesday mornings before the buses pulled in. Grey asphalt, a few trees still bare, the flag snapping against the pole in the February wind. Charlotte didn't do winter with drama. Just a steady, low cold that settled into your shoulders if you forgot your jacket, which Marin had. Again. She was 30 years old and running on 5 hours of sleep and a granola bar she'd eaten in the car. Behind her, the door opened and Priya dropped her tote bag on the table with the weight of a woman who'd graded 30 essays the night before. "Did you see that email from Hendricks?" Priya said, pulling out her own mug. "I survived Parent-Teacher Night 2022, which was still technically accurate." "Which one?" Marin didn't turn around. "The one about the spring assessment timeline. I skimmed it. It's a nightmare. Most of them are." Marin finally picked up her coffee, still too hot. She drank it anyway. "I've got first period in 8 minutes. How's Ava?" The name landed differently than most questions did. Softer, somehow. Marin felt the familiar pull in her chest, that particular warmth that was also, some mornings, a kind of ache. "She's good," Marin said. "She asked me yesterday why clouds don't fall." Priya smiled. "What did you tell her?" "I Googled it at 11:30 at night. Solid parenting. I try. That was the thing about talking about Ava. It was the easiest and hardest thing Marin did. Easy because she loved her daughter with a ferocity that still surprised her sometimes, still caught her off guard in quiet moments. Hard because Ava was 4 years old and already asking questions Marin didn't always have answers for. Questions about clouds. Questions about why some kids at her daycare had daddies who picked them up. Questions that Marin handled with the same calm competence she brought to everything else in her life, and then drove home thinking about at stoplights. She'd gotten good at holding things in the spaces between one moment and the next, the space between dropping Ava at Miss Diane's and walking into the school, the space between the last bell and picking her daughter back up. She'd built a life that fit neatly into those spaces, and it was a good life. Genuinely good. She wasn't pretending. She just didn't think about certain things anymore, or she tried not to. The school day moved the way school days did, in short bursts of controlled chaos, separated by moments of actual quiet that she'd learned to love. Third graders had a specific energy in February, restless, a little glazed, coming off the long stretch after winter break, with the exhausted optimism of people who'd been promised spring was coming, but had stopped entirely believing it. Marin's classroom was warm, at least. The radiator did its job, which was more than could be said for the copy machine. She'd taped student artwork along the window frames, crayon landscapes, painted handprints, one extremely ambitious rendering of the solar system that had been worked on for 3 weeks and taken up an entire corner of the bulletin board. She loved this room. She'd made it hers over 4 years, the same way she'd made her apartment hers, carefully, practically, with the understanding that home was something you built out of small decisions and consistency. She was in the middle of walking her class through a reading exercise when her phone buzzed in her desk drawer. She ignored it. It buzzed again. She finished the sentence she was reading aloud. The river ran fast and cold, and Thomas stood at the edge wondering if he was brave enough, and kept going. At lunch, she finally looked. Unknown number. Charlotte area code. The voicemail was 12 seconds long. "Ms. Nash, this is Patricia Webb calling from Meridian Health Technologies. Mr. Rockefeller's office asked me to reach out. He'd like to schedule a brief meeting at your earliest convenience. Please call back at..." Maren set her phone face down on the table. She looked at her sandwich. Turkey on wheat, slightly warm from being in her bag all morning. The bread was a little compressed on one side. She didn't pick up the phone again for the rest of the lunch period. She told herself it was nothing on the drive to pick up Ava. The 277 was moving, at least, which was unusual for 4:15. She took the ramp toward Plaza Midwood on autopilot, radio on some station playing something she didn't recognize, the heater running too loud on the passenger side. The city went by in the grey February light, the convenience store on Central that had a new sign, the nail salon she kept meaning to try, the shortcut through the residential streets that knocked 5 minutes off her time. She told herself it didn't mean anything. Harrison Rockefeller's assistant calling her. That could be anything. Paperwork, maybe. Something administrative that had been sitting unresolved for years. Closure on a technicality. She'd gotten good at not letting her mind go to him, not dwelling. She hadn't exactly erased the memory, Hunt. You didn't erase something that had been real. But she'd filed it away. Neatly. In the category of things that happened, and then you kept living. She pulled up to Miss Diane's house on Belvedere Avenue. The porch light was already on. Ava came out wearing her backpack, which was on backward because she always put it on backward, and holding a drawing folded in quarters, which she held out immediately as Maren crouched down. "I made a horse," Ava said. Maren unfolded it. It was, generously, a horse. 4 legs of varying lengths, a large head, what might have been a mane or might have been clouds. "I love it," Maren said. She meant it. Ava climbed into her car seat with the practiced urgency of a child who had things to do. Maren buckled her in, smoothed a curl back from her forehead. Ava had her hair, the dark waves, the tendency toward curls in humidity. But the eyes were different. Wide-set, grey-blue, with a quality of attention that Maren had always noticed and always tried not to name. She drove home. She gave Ava a bath and made pasta, and read 2 chapters of a book about a bunny who couldn't fall asleep, which felt personally targeted. She cleaned the kitchen. She laid out her clothes for tomorrow. At 10:47 p.m., sitting on her couch in the quiet after the apartment settled, she listened to the voicemail again. She didn't call back. She turned off the lamp. In the bedroom doorway, she stood for a moment watching Ava breathe in the dark, the small rise and fall, the curl of fingers against the pillow. Her daughter. Hers, completely. The phone buzzed one more time on the nightstand. She didn't look at it. She hadn't planned it as a confrontation. That was what Maren told herself on the drive downtown. Ava buckled in the back seat, humming something tuneless and kicking her feet against the seat in a slow, rhythmic way that she did when she was content. The morning was sharp and bright. One of those late March days in Charlotte that arrived ahead of schedule. The sky too blue for the season, the Bradford pears along Trade Street already going white. The kind of day that made you forget February had just happened. Maren had not forgotten February. She remembered the voicemail. She remembered the 3 that followed it over the next 2 weeks, each one slightly more formal than the last, Patricia Webb's voice getting incrementally more careful. The way voices did when the person behind them was managing someone else's discomfort. She'd deleted all of them without calling back. Then the letter came, certified mail. She'd had to sign for it. The envelope had a return address in the South End, a building she recognized by name, Meridian Health Technologies, because you couldn't drive through uptown Charlotte without seeing the logo on the glass tower at the corner of College and 5th. She'd held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Then she'd put it on the kitchen counter and made coffee and stood there drinking it before she read it. The letter was 3 paragraphs, formal, careful in the specific way that lawyers made things careful. It expressed a desire to open communication. It used the phrase mutual interest of all parties twice. It did not once use the word daughter. She'd read it at the counter while Ava ate cereal in the next room, asking whether penguins had knees. Maren had told her she thought so. She'd folded the letter back into the envelope and put it in the drawer under the silverware tray, which was where she kept things she wasn't ready to deal with. She'd pulled it out 4 nights later at midnight, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. She'd made a decision. The Meridian building had a parking garage that charged $8 for the first hour. Maren pulled a ticket from the machine and found a spot on level 2 next to a black Range Rover that had been backed in with the precision of someone who did everything with precision. She sat in her car for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled. Ava was already unbuckling herself, which she was not yet supposed to be able to do, and which she did every time. "You ready?" Maren asked. Ava held up her drawing. She'd been working on it in the back seat, a person, large-headed with yellow hair and a triangular body, standing next to a smaller person with curly brown hair. She'd labeled them in her careful, lurching 4-year-old letters, me and Momi. "Can I bring it?" Ava asked. "Yeah, baby, you can bring it." The lobby of the Meridian building was all clean lines and indirect lighting, polished concrete floors, a reception desk in white and chrome, a living wall of greenery along the far side that hummed faintly with a misting system. It smelled like nothing. The specific designed absence of smell that expensive buildings cultivated. Maren stood at the center of it in her good jacket, the navy blazer she saved for parent nights and school board meetings, and felt the faint pressure of being somewhere she hadn't been invited. Ava, for her part, had no such pressure. She looked around the lobby with the focused curiosity of a child cataloguing the world, eyes moving from the living wall to the elevator bank to the woman at the reception desk. "It's really clean," Ava said. "It is. Our school doesn't look like this." "No," Maren agreed, "it doesn't." She gave her name to the woman at the desk, who was already on the phone, who hadn't asked for her name, who held up one finger and turned slightly away. Maren waited. She was good at waiting. 4 years of single motherhood on a teacher's salary had made her good at a lot of things she hadn't asked to be good at. "I'm here to see Harrison Rockefeller," she said, when the woman hung up. A pause. The receptionist looked at her, then at Ava, back at Maren. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Mr. Rockefeller is in a meeting until—" "I know," Maren said. Her voice was even. "Please tell him Marin Nash is here. He'll want to know." Another pause. Longer this time. The receptionist picked up the phone. The 23rd floor smelled like coffee and recycled air, and something faintly floral that was probably a diffuser, somewhere near the elevator. Patricia Webb, who turned out to be a small woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up into silver-streaked hair, met them at the elevator bank with the expression of someone who had been briefed but was still recalibrating. "Ms. Nash." She extended her hand. Her grip was firm, quick. "Thank you for coming in. I should let you know that Mr. Rockefeller is currently in a quarterly review. It's running a bit long." "That's okay," Maren said. "We can wait." They were shown to a sitting area near the corner windows, low chairs, a glass coffee table, a view of uptown Charlotte, stretching south toward the stadium, and beyond that the flat sprawl of the city dissolving into suburbs and tree lines. The sky was still that too blue March blue. Ava pressed her face against the glass. "Are those tiny cars real?" she asked. "They're real," Maren said. "They're just far away." "How far?" "Very." Ava considered this with the gravity it deserved, then went back to examining the coffee table, which had a bowl of smooth river stones as a centerpiece. She picked one up and turned it over in her hands. Maren didn't tell her to put it down. She watched her daughter, the careful inspection, the slight tilt of the head, that particular quality of focused attention, and felt something tighten quietly in her chest. She heard the boardroom door open. The sound of it was ordinary. A latch releasing, the soft exhale of a heavy door on well-maintained hinges. Voices spilling out, professional winding down, the verbal equivalent of papers being gathered. Then footsteps, and Harrison Rockefeller walked out of the boardroom and into the hall and stopped. He was taller than she'd remembered, or maybe she'd just gotten used to not thinking about him in physical terms. 6'1", something close to it. Dark suit, no tie, the collar button open in the way that suggested the meeting had been long. His hair was shorter than it had been 4 years ago, the grey at his temples more pronounced. He held a leather portfolio in one hand. His other hand was at his side, loose until he saw her, and then it wasn't. Maren stood. She watched him see her, watched the precise moment of recognition cross his face. Not the theatrical kind, not the movie kind, but the real kind. The kind that moved through a person before they had a chance to arrange their expression around it. He was halfway through saying something to the man beside him. He stopped. Ava turned around from the window. She looked at Harrison with the frank, uncomplicated appraisal of a 4-year-old who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't looking. Her eyes, grey-blue, wide-set, with that quality of attention that Marin had always tried not to name, moved over his face with quiet interest. "Are you my daddy?" she asked. The words landed in the space between them like something physical. Not loud, not dramatic, just real and clear, and impossible to unhear. The man beside Harrison, someone from the meeting, someone with a tablet and a lanyard, looked at Ava, looked at Harrison, found a sudden reason to be somewhere else. Harrison stood very still. Marin watched him. She'd thought about this moment, in the way you thought about things you half believed would never actually happen, running through it in the abstract, telling herself she was prepared. She was not, she realized now, entirely prepared, because she'd imagined his face doing something she could categorize: denial, discomfort, the practiced neutrality of a man managing a situation. She hadn't imagined this. The stillness, the way the portfolio shifted in his grip, the way he looked at Ava like he was trying to locate himself in something he recognized. He crouched down. It was a small thing. Getting down to her level, the suit jacket pulling at the shoulder, one knee almost to the floor. He looked at her daughter, at 4-year-old eye level, and his voice when he spoke was quieter than Marin had heard it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ava," she said. She held up the drawing. "I made this, that's me and my mom." He took it, looked at it for a moment. Something moved through his face that Marin couldn't fully read from where she was standing. "It's really good," he said. "I know," Ava said. He stood slowly. He looked at Marin. She held his gaze. She'd spent 4 years building the kind of composure that didn't crack easily. And it held, mostly. But she was aware of her own heartbeat in a way she hadn't been 30 seconds ago, and her hands, clasped in front of her, were not entirely steady. "Marin," he said. Her name in his voice after 4 years of silence was a strange thing. Not comfortable, not unwelcome in the way she would have preferred. "Harrison," she said. Patricia Webb appeared in the hallway at a discreet distance, with the expression of someone deciding whether to intervene or evaporate. "We should talk," he said. "That's why I'm here." He nodded once. He looked at Ava, who had returned to examining the river stones, completely untroubled by the conversation happening above her, holding one up to the light coming through the window. He looked back at Marin. "Give me 10 minutes," he said. She sat back down. Patricia Webb brought Ava a small cup of apple juice in a real glass, which Ava received with both hands and great ceremony. Marin watched her daughter drink it and felt the tension in her shoulders begin to separate from the rest of her. Not dissolve, just clarify. Become a specific, manageable thing instead of the vague pressure she'd been carrying for weeks. She'd done it. She was here. Whatever came next was at least happening instead of waiting. Through the glass wall of the boardroom, she could see Harrison, his back to her, on the phone, one hand pressed flat against the table. Still. Controlled. But something in the set of his shoulders was different from how she'd seen him walk out of that room 8 minutes ago. She didn't look away. Ava finished her juice and put the glass down carefully on the table, exactly where she'd found it. "Mom?" she said. "Yeah? Can we get lunch after?" "Yes," Marin said. "We can get lunch after." The boardroom door opened. He suggested Thursday. Marin said she'd think about it, which was not a yes, and he seemed to understand the difference. He walked them to the elevator himself. Ava, carrying her drawing back, the one he'd returned carefully, folded the same way she'd given it to him, and he pressed the button and stood there while they waited and didn't try to fill the silence with anything. She'd given him credit for that, privately. On the drive home, he hadn't overcompensated, hadn't performed. She still didn't call until Wednesday night. She was grading spelling tests at the kitchen table, Ava already asleep. The apartment quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. She'd been through 17 tests, circling errors in pencil, because red felt punitive for third graders, and she was on her second glass of a wine that had been open since Saturday and was maybe a day past its best. She'd been telling herself she was fine with this arrangement, whatever it was, a dinner, a conversation, something that did not have to become anything else. She picked up the phone before she could talk herself into more wine and less action. He answered on the second ring. Maren. "Thursday works," she said. She didn't say hello. A pause. Short. "Okay, but I want to be clear about something before we sit down." She pressed a thumb into the edge of the table, a habit she had when she was keeping her voice level. "This isn't about us. Whatever happened 4 years ago, that's not what Thursday is." "I know," he said. "It's about Ava." "I know." She waited for him to say something else. He didn't. "Okay," she said. "Text me the place." She hung up, went back to the spelling tests. Necessary, necessary, necessary. She circled it gently. Outside, a dog was barking somewhere down the block, persistent and rhythmic, then stopping all at once. The refrigerator cycled off. She poured the rest of the wine down the sink. The restaurant was on East Boulevard in Dilworth, a neighborhood she liked for reasons she'd never fully articulated. Something about the scale of it, the bungalows sitting close to the sidewalk, the way the commercial stretch felt like it was still figuring out what it wanted to be. The place Harrison had chosen was called Provisions, which she'd passed 100 times without going in. Wood tables, warm lighting, a chalkboard menu above the bar, the kind of restaurant that was trying to be honest about what it was. She got there first, on purpose. She chose a table in the middle of the room, not a booth, not a corner. Something neutral. The bartender, a tall guy with a beard and a worn flannel shirt, glanced up when she sat down and went back to what he was doing. A couple at the far end of the room were sharing a bottle of something red and not talking, the comfortable kind of silence that couples who'd been together a long time sometimes had. Soft music, from somewhere she couldn't identify. Something with a piano. Low enough that she could still hear the table next to her, a woman telling her friend about a flooded bathroom. Maren ordered water, looked at the menu, looked at the door. He came in at 7:02, scanning the room in that way he had, quick, comprehensive, like taking inventory. He found her immediately. He'd changed from the office, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, no jacket. The sweater had a small pull near the left elbow. She noticed it the way she noticed everything, the way 4 years of being solely responsible for another human being had sharpened her attention to small details that other people missed. He sat down across from her. "Hey," he said. "Hey." The bartender appeared, unhurried. Harrison ordered a whiskey. Neat. She ordered a glass of whatever red they had open. The bartender named something from Sonoma, and she said fine. They looked at the menus for a moment, in silence, the kind of silence that was working hard. "How was her day?" Harrison asked. Maren looked up. "She learned the word enormous today," she said. "She used it 6 times before dinner. The eggs were enormous. The bath was enormous." She paused. "The bathtub, technically." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, almost. "She's something," he said. "Yeah." Maren set the menu down. "She is." The food came. She'd ordered the roasted chicken without really deciding. Something that had just happened while she was thinking about other things. And they talked about Ava, the way 2 people talked about a person they'd loved separately for different lengths of time. He asked questions, careful ones, not the performative kind that were really just statements dressed up with a question mark. He asked what she was like in the morning, whether she was shy with new people, what she was afraid of. "Escalators," Maren said, "and the garbage truck. And that specific episode of a cartoon I can't get her to explain. She just says it's wrong." "That sounds right," he said, "for 4. You know a lot of 4-year-olds. He picked up his glass, put it down without drinking. "My sister has 2 kids, a 4 and a 7. I see them most Sundays." She hadn't known that. She hadn't known much about his life after the part where she was in it, by design, because knowing would have made the not having harder. "She know about Ava?" Maren asked. "Not yet." She nodded. That was honest, at least. She respected honesty more than she'd once respected comfort. The couple at the far end of the room had moved on to dessert. The woman with the flooded bathroom had gotten louder. Something about the landlord not calling back, a wet vac borrowed from a neighbor. The piano music had shifted to something slower. The bartender wiped down the bar in long, even strokes. "Can I ask you something?" Harrison said. She looked at him. "Why now? You had my number. You've had it for 4 years." She took a breath. Set down her fork. She'd thought about how to answer this, had run through versions of it in the shower and in the car and in the 4 minutes before sleep on nights when her brain refused to cooperate. "Because she's 4, Maren said. "Because she's starting to understand that the world has a shape, and she's starting to figure out what shape her world is. And I didn't want her to grow up with a gap in it that I put there because I was angry." She paused. "I was angry." "You had every right." "I know I did." She said it without heat. "I'm not asking for permission to have been angry, Harrison. I'm telling you why I waited and why I stopped waiting." He held her gaze. The muscle in his jaw moved. The way it did. She'd forgotten she remembered that, when he was holding something back. "I was scared," he said. 4 years ago. I don't say that like it excuses anything. It doesn't. No. You chose the easier thing. Yes." The word landed flat. No argument. No deflection. Just, yes. She hadn't expected that either. And it moved through her in a way she didn't entirely want it to, loosening something she'd held tightly for long enough that loosening felt risky. "What happened?" she asked. "With the wedding?" A beat. "It didn't," he said. "We called it 8 months out. It was—" He stopped, started again. "It was the right call. We both knew it." She wasn't sure how to feel about that. She didn't let herself feel anything about it, at least not right now at this table, with the piano playing something she still couldn't name, and her chicken going slightly cold on the plate. "I'm not looking for anything from you," she said. "I want to be straight about that. I know. I don't need your money. I don't need—" "Maren." He said her name quietly, just the 2 syllables, and something in the way he said it made her stop. "I know. I'm not here because of obligation." He turned his glass slowly on the table, a quarter turn, a habit she also hadn't realized she remembered. "I'm here because of her, and because—" He stopped. The bartender passed behind him with 2 plates, the clatter of a tray adjustment, a brief break in the low music. "Because what?" she said. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were darker in this light, the lines at their corners deeper than they'd been. He looked like a man who had made decisions he was still paying for, which she supposed was what they both looked like. "Because I didn't stop thinking about you," he said, "and I know that's not what tonight is supposed to be about." She didn't answer. She picked up her fork. Outside, a siren moved past on East Boulevard, faint and then gone. She didn't look up. He showed up. That was the thing Maren kept coming back to in the weeks that followed. Not the legal process, the paperwork, the attorney his office retained, the DNA confirmation that came back on a Tuesday morning while she was eating toast and felt like the quietest possible way for something enormous to be made official. Not the first check that arrived without fanfare, more than she'd asked for, with a handwritten note that said for Ava, not for negotiation. Not any of the logistics, which were handled with the same clean efficiency that apparently governed every part of Harrison Rockefeller's professional life. The thing that kept moving through her was simpler than all of that. He showed up. Wednesday pickup. He was at Eastover Elementary at 3:15, standing near the front entrance in a jacket that was slightly too formal for a school parking lot, his hands in his pockets, watching the double doors the way people watched for things they weren't sure would come through. Ava came out in a group of 3 kids, mid-conversation about something important, and then she saw him and stopped talking entirely and ran. Maren had watched from her car. She'd told herself she was just making sure, that she'd drive away once she confirmed everything was fine. Once she saw that the handoff was clean, and Ava was comfortable, and Harrison was whatever Harrison was going to be in this new configuration. She'd told herself that. She sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. He crouched down when Ava reached him, the same way he'd done in the boardroom. Same knee almost to the ground, same suit jacket pulling at the shoulder. He said something. Ava said something back, gesturing at the backpack of the girl walking past her. Harrison nodded seriously. He took Ava's backpack without being asked. Maren pulled out of the lot. She picked up Ava from Miss Diane's on Wednesdays now. Harrison dropped her there after their 2 hours together, which had been Maren's condition, a neutral handoff point until she was sure. Miss Diane had the discretion of a woman who'd been watching other people's children for 20 years and understood that families came in all kinds of arrangements, and none of her business was her policy. The first Wednesday, Ava came out with a small stuffed bear she hadn't left with. "He got me a bear," she said, holding it up. It was brown, simple, with a red ribbon. Not the kind of gift that was trying too hard. "I see that," Maren said. "His name is Socks." "Why Socks?" Ava examined the bear's feet with the authority of someone who had put considerable thought into this. "Because he looks like he's wearing socks." Maren looked at the bear's feet. They were slightly lighter than the rest of him, the fur a different texture. She would not have noticed that. Harrison had. She buckled Ava in and got in the driver's seat and sat for a second with her hands on the wheel. "Did you have a good time?" she asked. "We went to the park," Ava said, "and he pushed me on the swings. And he doesn't know how to do the monkey bars, but he tried." "How'd that go?" "Not great," Ava said, with the compassion of someone who had witnessed a genuine effort. Maren drove home with something in her chest that she didn't have a clean name for. The call came on a Friday evening in April. She was on the couch with a stack of parent communication forms and a pen that was running out. The TV on but muted. Some cooking show. People carrying things urgently. And her phone lit up with his name. She'd added it back to her contacts 2 weeks ago, a practical decision, because Patricia Webb was not a person you wanted relaying every message indefinitely. "Hey," she said. "Hey." A pause. She could hear traffic in the background. He was outside somewhere, the ambient sound of Uptown, probably still at the office at 6:30 on a Friday, which tracked. "I wanted to ask you something about tomorrow." "Okay. There's a thing at Freedom Park, some kind of family festival. I looked it up and there are, I don't know, it sounded like something she'd like. There's a petting zoo. Ava is going through a phase about goats specifically," Maren said. "So that's relevant." "Yeah, a beat. The traffic in the background. The cooking show's silent urgency." "I was going to ask if you'd come," he said, "if that's something you'd want to do. All 3 of us." He paused. "I know that's different than what we've been doing." She looked at the ceiling. The light fixture in the living room had a dead bulb she'd been meaning to replace. She'd been meaning to replace it since January. "What time might?" she said. Freedom Park on a Saturday in April was the version of Charlotte that made people move to Charlotte. The greenway was packed. Strollers, dogs on leashes, teenagers on bikes who swerved too close to the walking path and apologized without slowing down. The festival had taken over the main lawn, food trucks, a stage with a local band playing something folky and earnest, a row of craft vendors, and at the far end, unmistakably, a petting zoo enclosed with low white fencing. Ava spotted it from 40 yards away and communicated her feelings about this non-verbally by accelerating. Maren caught her hand. "Hey, walk." "But the goats." "The goats will still be there in 30 seconds. Ava walked fast, in the technical sense of not running. Harrison was beside Maren, slightly behind, calibrating his distance the way he'd been doing all morning. Present but not presumptuous, close enough to be there, careful enough not to crowd. She'd noticed it. She'd noticed a lot of things about the way he moved through this day, which was tentatively, in the way of someone who understood they were being given something they hadn't earned yet. The goats were a success. There were 4 of them, 2 adults and 2 kids, and Ava stood at the fence with the feed pellets the woman gave her and was methodical about it in a way that made Maren want to laugh, offering a pellet to each goat in turn, narrating quietly to them, apparently explaining something. Harrison stood next to her at the fence. He didn't take photos, which Maren noticed because most people would have. He just watched. "She talks to animals like they're going to talk back," Maren said. "Does it work?" "Hasn't not worked yet." He looked at her sideways at that. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter. They bought food from a truck near the stage, tacos that were too messy to eat standing up. So they found a patch of grass in the shade of a willow oak that was just starting to leaf out. The new growth, that particular yellow-green of early spring. Ava ate half her taco and became interested in a dog that a couple near them had brought, which led to a lengthy negotiation about whether she could pet it, which she won. And then she was 3 feet away, crouching next to a golden retriever named Biscuit, and had apparently forgotten they existed. "She makes friends fast," Harrison said. "Always." Maren picked at a piece of the tortilla. "Even as a baby, she'd just look at people like she was deciding whether they were worth it." "Did you?" He glanced at her. "Make friends fast." "No," Maren said. "I'm slow with people." She paused. "I'm careful." He nodded like that was information he was storing. The band had moved into something slower. The afternoon had settled into that particular golden hour light, everything slightly soft, the park full of the kind of ordinary weekend noise that Maren usually found soothing. She was not entirely finding it soothing right now. She was finding it harder than expected, to sit in the sun next to Harrison Rockefeller and not feel the weight of the years between the last time and this time. The gap in the middle that was also, somehow, the small person currently telling a golden retriever what her stuffed bear was named. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah." "When you saw her, in the boardroom, what did you think?" He was quiet for a moment. A bee moved through the grass near his foot. He watched it without moving. "I thought she looked like my father," he said. "Around the eyes." He paused. "And I thought, I don't know how to explain it. I thought, I have been a coward. That's the word that came to me." Maren looked at him. He was looking at Ava, still with the dog, the golden light cutting across the side of his face, the grey in his temples more visible out here than it was in offices. He looked tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. "You were," she said, not cruelly, just accurately. "I know." "Courage isn't about not being scared," she said. "I tell my kids that all the time. 8-year-olds, and they get it." Something moved in his expression. He looked at her. "You're not wrong to throw that at me." "I'm not throwing anything," she said. "I'm just telling you what I tell 8-year-olds." The corner of his mouth moved. She looked away. Ava came running back, grass stains already on both knees, the taco entirely forgotten. She landed between them with the confidence of a child who assumed she was wanted wherever she arrived. "Biscuit knows how to shake us," she announced. "I taught him." "In 5 minutes?" Harrison said. "He already knew," Ava admitted. "I just asked." He laughed, a real one, short and unguarded, and Maren felt it somewhere she hadn't been expecting to feel anything. Ava climbed into his lap with no ceremony, as though this were a thing they had always done, and reached for the remaining half of her taco. Harrison held still in the careful way of someone who was afraid to move wrong and break something that had just become real. He looked at Maren over the top of Ava's head. She looked back. Neither of them said anything. Across the lawn, the band started a new song. Ava ate her taco. The willow oak moved in a low wind. Harrison's hand came up slowly, carefully, and rested on Ava's back. Maren picked up her cup. It was empty. She held it anyway. The document arrived on a Monday. Maren was in the middle of her prep period, sitting at her desk with a red pen she wasn't using, and a lukewarm coffee she was, when her phone buzzed with an email from Harrison's attorney. She opened it expecting another revision to the custody schedule. They'd been adjusting things incrementally, a Wednesday here, a Saturday there, the slow bureaucratic work of making a family out of something that had started as an absence. Instead, it was a single PDF, 3 pages, and the subject line said, "Amended filing. Name addition." She read it twice. He had filed to add Ava's name to his will. Not a trust, not a financial instrument, his actual will, the legal document that said what mattered to him and to whom. Ava Rose Nash Rockefeller. The hyphen had been his suggestion, Patricia Webb had mentioned in a follow-up email, and he'd wanted Maren to see the filing before it was finalized in case she had objections. She did not have objections. She sat with her phone in her hand for a while. The classroom was empty, the desks in their rows, the solar system poster still occupying its corner, one of the planets slightly loose at the corner where the tape was giving out. The fluorescent light above the sink had finally stopped flickering. Maintenance had come last Tuesday, a week and a half after the request, which was honestly faster than she'd expected. She put her phone face down on the desk. She picked up the red pen. Put it down. She picked up her phone and typed, "I saw the filing. Thank you." 3 dots appeared. Then, of course. She put the phone away and spent the remaining 12 minutes of her prep period staring at a stack of book reports she was absolutely going to grade later. He came to the spring recital. It was a Thursday evening at the end of April. The Eastover Elementary gymnasium transformed with the specific optimism of school events. Folding chairs, a paper banner the third graders had painted, a portable speaker someone's parent had brought because the built-in sound system had one bad channel. The gymnasium smelled like floor wax and the particular combination of 50 families in a warm room. Maren was near the side aisle, saving a seat with her bag, when Harrison arrived. He was in a blazer this time, dark blue, more casual than his office clothes, and he had his sister with him, a woman in her late 30s, dark-haired, who had his same quality of contained attention and who extended her hand to Maren with a directness that Maren immediately respected. "Claire Sullivan," she said, "his older sister. I've been wanting to meet you for a while." "Maren Nash. I know." Claire's expression was warm and a little complicated. "He talks about Ava constantly, and he talks about you in the way that people talk about things they're not ready to admit yet." Harrison, standing slightly behind his sister, looked at the ceiling. "Claire," he said, "I'm just being accurate." Maren found that she did not entirely hate this woman. They sat 3 across, Maren, Harrison, Claire's, and the recital started with the kindergartners doing something involving streamers, and then the first graders, and then the second graders who had a surprisingly competent recorder performance that got genuine applause, and then the third graders filed onto the stage. Ava was in the second row wearing the dress Maren had ironed twice, because Ava had sat on it after the first time. Her hair was pulled back with a clip that was already listing to one side. She found Maren in the audience immediately, the way she always did, and waved with the whole arm. Then she found Harrison. She waved at him too. He raised a hand, a small gesture, controlled. But Maren saw the way his jaw moved, the way he swallowed once, and she looked back at the stage because some things felt private, even when they were happening right next to you. The song was something about seasons. The third graders knew roughly 70% of the words and committed fully to the remaining 30. Ava sang with the focused intensity she brought to things she cared about, slightly off-tempo but entirely certain. When it was over, Claire leaned past Harrison and said quietly to Maren, "She's incredible." "I know," Maren said. "She gets that from you," Claire said, "the certainty." Ava fell asleep in the car on the way home, the dress wrinkled, the hair clip finally surrendering entirely. Maren drove the familiar route, Eastway to Commonwealth to her street, and Harrison was in the passenger seat because she'd offered and he'd accepted, and now there was the specific, contained quiet of 2 people in a car at night with a sleeping child in the back and nothing between them but the low sound of the radio and the city going by outside the windows. She parallel parked in front of her building in one move. He noticed. She knew he noticed. "I'll carry her up," he said. She almost said no, said yes instead. He lifted Ava from the car seat with the careful competence of someone who had been paying attention to how it was done, one hand supporting her back, the other under her knees, Ava's head dropping to his shoulder without waking. Maren held the building door, then the apartment door. She turned the lamp on in Ava's room, the low one, and pulled back the covers, and he set her down, and Maren got her shoes off and pulled the blanket up. They stood in the hallway outside Ava's room for a moment. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hum. A bus somewhere on the main road 3 blocks over. "You want coffee?" Maren said. "Or—" She glanced toward the kitchen. "I have that, and I think there's half a bottle of wine from last week that's probably still okay." "Coffee's fine." She made it the way she always made it at night, 1 cup at a time from the stovetop mocha pot that was older than her career, and required the specific technique of knowing when to pull it off the heat. She handed him the mug that said "World's Okayest Teacher" without thinking, and then thought about it, and he was already holding it and reading it. "Accurate?" he asked. "Some days." He sat at the kitchen table. She stood at the counter, the way she always stood when she wasn't sure about something. The edge of the counter against her lower back, both hands wrapped around her own mug. "She's going to ask questions," Maren said, "about the two of us when she's older. Kids figure things out. I know. I don't want to lie to her. About what happened, about why you weren't there." He held the mug in both hands. "What would you tell her? That people make choices out of fear that they wouldn't make out of strength, and that the choices don't define you as much as what you do next." She paused. "That's what I'd tell her." He looked at her steadily, his eyes in the kitchen light, the grey at his temples, the small pull in the sleeve of his sweater. He looked like a man sitting very still in the middle of something he didn't want to move through too fast. Maren. Her name again? With that particular weight he gave it that she'd been trying not to notice. "I'm not here just for Ava." She looked at him. "I know that's not what you want to hear right now," he said. "Or maybe, I don't know what you want. I'm not assuming anything. He stopped, set the mug down. "I don't want to be something that only exists in Ava's schedule. I want to know if there's a version of this that's more than that." The refrigerator hummed. Something dripped from the faucet. Slow, the seal starting to go. She'd been meaning to call the landlord. She looked at him for a long moment, at his hands on the table, at the steadiness in his face that was not performance. She'd learned by now to tell the difference. That was just him, the particular way he held himself when he was waiting for something that mattered. "I'm not a sure thing," she said. "I want to be honest with you about that. I don't trust fast. I don't forget easily. And I have a daughter who comes first in every single equation. I know. You can't make a decision like this and then get scared and leave again. I know that too." She looked at him a little longer. "Okay," she said finally. "Not yes, not a promise, just a door left open instead of closed." He nodded once. He finished his coffee. He stood. He brought his mug to the sink and rinsed it, which was the smallest possible thing and somehow not small at all. She walked him to the door. In the doorway he stopped and turned and looked at her. 1 second. Maybe 2, that particular quality of attention she recognized and had been defending against for weeks. And then he said goodnight, and she said goodnight, and he walked down the hallway toward the elevator. She stood in the open doorway until she heard the elevator arrive. She went inside. The faucet dripped once in the kitchen. She turned off the lamp. 7 months later, Ava started kindergarten. It was a Tuesday in late August, the kind of morning that Charlotte did in summer's last gasp. Heavy air, the sky white before it turned blue, the cicadas still going in the trees along the parking lot, as though they hadn't gotten the memo that the season was almost done. Maren had laid out Ava's clothes the night before, new sneakers, white with a small pink stripe, that Ava had worn around the apartment for 3 days to break them in. A backpack with a lion on it, because lions were, currently, the most important animal, a position previously held by goats, and before that by horses, and before that by a brief but intense period of interest in axolotls. Harrison met them in the school parking lot at 7:45. He was already there when they pulled in, standing near the entrance with his hands in his pockets, and he'd clearly tried to dress down, dark jeans, a simple grey shirt, and almost succeeded except for the watch, which was the kind of watch that didn't know how to dress down. Maren had stopped mentioning the watch. It was part of him, like the precise way he parallel parked, and the habit of turning his coffee mug a quarter turn before he drank from it. You took people in their entirety, or you didn't take them. She had decided sometime in July, taking him. Not in a rush. Not with the declaration and the ceremony that movies required. Just in the daily accumulation of small decisions, the text she answered instead of letting sit, the seat she left open at the recital, the coffee she made for 2 without being asked. Trust was not a switch, it was a practice. She'd been practicing. Ava saw him from across the parking lot and ran. He caught her, lifted her once, set her down. She was showing him something on her backpack, a small clip-on charm, a golden lion, that had appeared attached to the zipper this morning and that Maren had not put there. She filed that information away. She crossed the parking lot. "Hey!" Harrison said. "Hey!" He looked at her for a moment in the white morning light. There was something in his face that he didn't try to arrange away anymore. She'd noticed that. The careful neutrality he'd worn the first few months had come down in increments, the way storm shutters came down after the weather passed, and what was underneath was just him, steadier than she'd expected, more uncertain than she'd expected, more present than she'd expected from a man who had once chosen absence. People surprised you. She believed that, had always believed it, even when the evidence ran the other direction. "Ready?" he said. "Ask her," Marin said. He looked down at Ava, who was surveying the entrance to the school, with the expression of someone arriving at a place she had already decided to conquer. "Ready?" he asked. "Obviously," Ava said. The classroom smelled like new crayons and the specific industrial cleaner that every school in America smelled like, a smell that hit Marin somewhere deep and familiar every single time. Ava's cubby had her name on it, in the teacher's careful block letters. Ava. She stood in front of it for a moment, touching the letters, and then hung up her backpack with the efficiency of someone who had been watching her mother do this her whole life and had paid attention. She turned around, found them both. "You can go," she said, not unkindly. "Just ready." Marin crouched down, straightened the lion charm on the zipper, smoothed one curl back from Ava's forehead. "You know where I am if you need me," she said. "I know, Mom. And you know where he is." Ava looked at Harrison. He raised a hand. She gave him a look that was patient in the specific way that 5-year-olds were patient with adults who were being slightly too much. "I know where everyone is," she said. "I'm fine." Marin stood. They walked back through the hallway together, past the kindergarten artwork already going up on the bulletin boards, past the trophy case, past the copy machine that was still out of order. The same red marker sign she'd been reading for 10 months, the tape now failing on 2 corners instead of 1. Outside, the morning had gotten lighter. The cicadas had quieted. A few other parents were filing back toward the parking lot. That particular combination of relieved and unmoored that first-day drop-offs produced. Harrison stopped near the edge of the parking lot. She stopped beside him. They stood there for a moment, looking back at the building, at the windows of the kindergarten classroom visible from the lot, though Ava was not in them, because Ava was already somewhere inside, being fine. "She didn't look back," he said. "She never does." "Does that—" he paused. "Does that bother you?" Marin considered it, the question, and what it said about him that he'd thought to ask it. "No," she said. "It means we did it right." She looked at him. "She knows we're still there, she just doesn't need to check." He was quiet for a moment. "I want that," he said. "I want her to know I'm still there without having to check." "Then be there," Marin said. "Keep being there, that's it. That's the whole thing." He looked at her. The morning light, the parking lot, the sound of a school bus somewhere around the corner, making its second run. His hand moved, not reaching, just shifting, and found hers at her side, and she let it. And they stood there in the ordinary Tuesday morning of a new school year, with their daughter somewhere inside, learning her cubby number, and not looking back. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. The name Rockefeller had been added to Ava's school records that September. 1 line on an enrollment form. 3 syllables. The kind of small thing that permanently changes the shape of a story. The end. Final message. Sometimes love doesn't end. It gets interrupted. By fear, by timing, by the choices we make when we're not yet brave enough to make the right ones. But what is real has a way of finding its shape again, not in grand gestures, not in declarations, in the small repeated acts of showing up, of staying, of choosing every day to be someone worth trusting. Marin didn't forgive Harrison because he deserved it. She forgave him because Ava deserved a father, and because she deserved, finally, to put down something heavy she'd been carrying alone for a long time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do in spite of it. And sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away, it's staying and becoming someone who earns the right to. Question for you. Marin chose to open a door instead of keeping it closed, not for herself, not at first, but for Ava. But somewhere along the way, it became for herself, too. Have you ever held something closed out of self-protection, and then realized that opening it was the braver choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your participation means a lot to the channel. If this story moved you, If you've ever watched someone choose fear over love or waited for someone to finally be brave enough to show up, hit that like button and subscribe. There's more where this came from. Real love, real mistakes, real second chances.